Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by UNA, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barner. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest on the Sourcing Hero podcast is Robert Čačković. Robert is a sourcing buyer for Bugatti Rimac, a Croatian company that develops and produces cutting-edge hypercars. He has been in procurement since college and is currently completing his MBA with a master's thesis focused on improvements of procurement processes in the automotive industry. So I'm very much looking forward to learning more about this. Robert, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Thank you for having me.
So I talked a little bit about where your work and where you're focusing as far as your studies go. But what else do you think it's good for people to know about your professional experience?
Well, I would say that as you mentioned, for the last 10 years, I have been involved in procurement activities across fast-moving consumer goods and automotive industry. So ever since my college days, my first job position was as a purchasing specialist in one of Croatian's meat processing companies. So basically there I learned how to be fast, resourceful, be proactive, and basically learned the basics of purchasing. Their inputs were changing quickly, demand was volatile, and pretty much something was always late. So my test management skills got tested every day. After that, I have moved to one of Croatian's sheet metal processing companies, basically to the company which produces various products for mainly German automotive OEMs. And actually, that was my first contact with the automotive industry, the industry that is even more demanding and KPI oriented than FMCG. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. One thing led to another, and pretty much 1 year later, I started to work in Rimac Automotive, Croatian's first automotive company that develops and produces hypercars. And today, 5 years later, I am working as a sourcing buyer in Bugatti Rimac, and my main focus is on sourcing and contracting suppliers for our new project.
Now, I imagine a lot of the people listening in today are very jealous of the fact that you've had the opportunity to invest in your procurement skills at the secondary education level. So it really sets you apart that in addition to having experience in procurement, you've also made the choice to incorporate it into your MBA studies. How do you feel that this opportunity has helped your career?
Well, definitely working in Rimac Automotive for the last 5 years was, I would say, very intensive. But luckily, I had an opportunity to watch firsthand how companies being transformed from startup to corporation. And working in procurement, along this process, somehow, you're always exposed to various process optimizations and changes that are constantly going around. So to be honest, actually that experience encouraged me to gather my thoughts, gather my ideas, and try to incorporate them into my MBA studies. What is interesting is that the greatest benefit that I got from that was actually a broader way of thinking and approach on how to do procurement. Because, basics on how companies are doing procurement these days is already well known. But actually collecting new ideas and implementing them in your everyday work makes a greater difference. So it showed me that there isn't always one right way how to do something or how to overcome certain process bottlenecks, but actually there is a variety of solutions that can be applied into getting the final result that you want in the end.
That's fantastic. And I love that idea that you're collecting new information, putting it into practice, but maybe most importantly, that there's not one right solution for any of these challenges. Now, I'm interested in whether there are any trends, whether procurement trends or supply chain or top news stories that you're monitoring that tie back specifically to your work in automotive.
Well, to be honest, in general, I like to keep track on all new procurement trends that are currently ongoing. So, for example, I think that LinkedIn is a great media platform through which you can gain free access to a variety of procurement topics of your interest, of course. But also, these days, many procurement professionals are, openly sharing their own knowledge and insights through their own newsletter. So simply what you need to do is subscribe to the newsletter and you get a fresh batch of procurement knowledge daily. But currently what interests me the most is, of course, the whole, I would say, AI and ChatGPT implementation within procurement. Basically, based on the information that I managed to gather so far, I think that this will certainly simplify our everyday work and make, I would say, maybe majority of these tedious procurement tasks that we need to do daily much quicker, much functional. But how to actually implement these services within the everyday operation? Well, yeah, that's the question that is open for discussion, I would say.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think 2023 is definitely going to be the year that we all look back on and realize, okay, OpenAI, ChatGPT hit, everybody started experimenting with and brainstorming, how can we apply this? To your point about applying new technologies to some of the more technical or laborious tasks that procurement is responsible for, a lot of times the goal is getting those things off of our plates so that we can invest in strategy, invest in relationships. And I know just enough about automotive to sort of be dangerous and to know that strategic supplier relationships are incredibly critical. So my question for you is sort of twofold. Can you talk a little bit about the nature of your relationships with your most strategic suppliers, but then also how you keep that all in balance with your internal stakeholders?
For sure. So basically, currently we are managing our most strategic suppliers, as you mentioned, as our business partners. So these are usually the companies that have, let's say, the greatest influence or potentially greatest impact on the overall company's business in operation or ongoing projects that the company has. So how do we manage it? So what we usually do is pretty basic. So we have internal weekly meetings where all of the internal stakeholders from various company departments are present. For example, that would mean my colleague from sales, logistics, finance, procurement, and we openly discuss and comment on the ongoing project tasks, and we agree on how to resolve them. So basically, in the end, once this is done, informations or feedback can be shared to external parties, suppliers in this case, and basically we continue working on them. So in one way, they are our definitely partners, and the goal is in the end the same: developing the final product and getting the final product on our stock, on our warehouse.
Now, given that strategic suppliers, I like the idea of considering them business partners. Do you also, in some cases, end up working into the supply chain? So potentially having contact with your tier 2, tier 3 suppliers and even beyond?
Absolutely. I mean, depending on the complexity of the system or on the automotive part that I'm trying to source, basically this dictates my future supplier structure. So, for example, if the part is a more complex one, meaning it has, let's say, multiple subcomponents in its assembly, or the final product includes various types of technologies, which one supplier cannot develop or produce by its own, then we definitely go with the route of introducing tier 2 supplier or suppliers, which are then in the end working with the tier 1 on the final product. Of course, this relationship is usually governed with some kind of RASIC metrics just to smoothen the process and in the end decision making about the final goal.
Now, clearly you're somebody who likes to learn, likes to read, and even the fact that you've continued your studies at the graduate level while doing all of this work is incredibly impressive. How do you find that it all comes together? So where would you say that your day job, as it were, and then your studies or your work on your master's thesis sort of come together?
I would say that we have a bit referenced this already in our previous discussion, but I would say that the touch point between both can be easily found in the everyday work activities, let's say on a daily level. I mean, one of the main drivers why I wanted to get some fresh optimization ideas and incorporate them within my master thesis was actually to investigate what is necessary to make a process, let's say, more linear and more robust. So yeah, I would say a connection between the two can be found on a daily level.
And it's interesting because this idea of making it both leaner and also more robust, that's an unbelievable challenge. A lot of the conversations that I've been having recently are about maybe a shift that's underway, where the last couple of years, people have been so focused on making sure supplies show up or making sure risks don't disrupt an operation. And the early thought is that 2024 is going to bring a return to focus on cost, but we can't let go of that risk element either. And so those two and the friction between them, I think, is going to continue to be a challenge. You picked an excellent topic to study.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. So on one side, mitigating the risks is the most crucial point that a company, or in this case procurement, can do, because our eyes always needs to be on the long game and pretty much on our long strategy. Of course, along the way, we are always, as you mentioned, focused on the overall daily, weekly, monthly battles that we are doing. But the goal is much longer, I would say.
Yeah. Now, Robert, before I let you go today, I want to take you through a tradition here at the Sourcing Hero. I have two questions that I'm going to ask you. You can choose either one. It's entirely up to you. And there are no wrong answers. So everybody will be waiting to find out what you've picked and what your thoughts are. But first, for anybody that's listening in for the first time, let me give you those two questions. The first one is, what does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you? And the second option is, what would you say heroism looks like in a business context?
Oof, these are tough ones.
We ask the big tough questions at the end of the conversation.
At the end. Well, I think that in general, based on my so far experience working in procurement, I think it requires a lot of adaptability, proactivity, and a wide range of managing various tasks and stakeholders simultaneously in order to then achieve the final result that you want to achieve in the end. So I think that everyone who is a procurement professional and everyone who is, bravely fighting this procurement battle that we are fighting on a daily basis can definitely consider themselves as a sourcing hero, at least in my book. So absolutely. I would just say, keep pushing, guys. We can do this together, definitely.
Agreed. And that's sort of back to your point about LinkedIn, right? There's all of these resources available to all of us, but we are also available to each other. And I think to the extent that we're there to brainstorm, take an idea from retail or FMCG, like you said, and move it over into automotive, right? Every opportunity creates a new spark of ideas. Now, Robert, if people are meeting you for the first time through this conversation, and maybe they want to learn about your studies, or maybe they're curious on your perspective on AI or automotive, what is the best way for them to reach out and get in touch with you?
Well, I would say that honestly, I'm not a big fan of social media. So the only site that I use on a daily basis is actually LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to get in contact or get in touch, feel free to use my LinkedIn page or my private email, robert.čačković@gmail.com.
Excellent, Robert. Thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your point of view.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for the Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well and always remember that you can be a hero too.